Two players Nashville Predators fans were very interested to see in their first NHL full seasons were Luke Evangelista and Tommy Novak. We're going to discuss their season and award them season superlatives on today's Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast, and thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Going to kick off this episode today with a shout out to our Locked On Pred heads. Those are our everyday listeners who tune in to talk Nashville Predators hockey with us each and every day. We thank you for your support. We love that we get to spend just a little bit of your day with you. I am Ann Kimmel. I am a writer at Penalty Box Radio. And my friends, I have a partner in crime.
I'm Emma Lingen, and I'm the Preds site editor and reporter for the Hockey News.
So on today's show, Emma and I are going to continue our season superlatives. We're going to talk about two players that came into the season with a lot of focus on them, Tommy Novak and Luke Evangelista. When general manager Barry Trotz talked about a reset and a youth movement, these were two players Nashville Predators fans really kind of set some high expectations for. We're going to take a closer look at their seasons. We're going to talk about the growth that we saw from them over the course of the year. Talk about some of the highs and lows in the postseason. And then we're going to have a frank discussion about that Tommy Novak contract. But before we dive into all that, want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. All right, Emma, we've been cranking out these season superlatives, and, we've done that top line. We've done the fourth line, identity line, however you want to call them. But now we're in that kind of mushy middle six that maybe didn't live up to the expectations. And I think part of that was, I feel like the expectations for the middle six were set when Barry Trotz talked about, like, we're going to do a youth movement and we're going to give young players opportunities. And I'm not really sure it panned out like Predators fans maybe thought it was going to.
Yeah, I think, I think the whole youth movement thing, and this is something that I feel like I've had to remind people about, is like, I think people hear youth movement and they hear we're going to get young overnight. And like all of a sudden we're going to have all these young guys. That, my friends, is called a full rebuild, which is what Barry Trotz said from the beginning we are not going to do. So everyone, I think, just they fixate on one thing that he said, which is we want to get younger, which you can still do. But if you like make your entire team younger overnight, then you're like the Chicago Blackhawks. And that's not the tear down kind of rebuild that Barry Trotz and the Preds want to do. Right. So I think, but like I said, people just fixate on the, hey, wait a minute, I thought we were going to get younger. So they see any older guy who comes in as someone who's taking a spot from a younger guy. And it's like, no, actually those older guys, I think, are kind of your safety net for the younger ones in a sense, because sometimes the younger ones aren't ready for the NHL yet if they're still in the minors, or maybe they are ready for the NHL, but they're not ready for that elevated role that people want to see them in. And the worst thing you can do is put them in a role that they are not ready for. Yes. Because then that's just going to, it's going to destroy their confidence. They're going to fail. And it's just going to be, it's not going to be good for them or for the team. So I think it's, again, people just see, oh, youth movement, we want an entire team of Luke Evangelistas. It's like, well, no, maybe not. Like, yeah, that might not be good. I think you need your Ryan O'Reillys and your Philip Forsbergs too. But I think, yeah, that's one thing that kind of bothers me when people get upset about the younger guys maybe not getting as many opportunities. It's like, no, they'll get there. You can't give them too many opportunities, because then they bite off more than they can chew, right. And then it's not good for anyone.
It's that, people kind of have talked about this season, some of the younger players, and it's almost this philosophy of throw them in the deep end of the pool and see if they can swim. And I'm like, you can do that, but if they can't swim, you have set them back. Like
Yes.
there is a trajectory to this, and it's not the same for every player, and it's not linear, but you can't just throw a guy in a second line role who is relatively new to the NHL and say sink or swim.
Right.
That's just not great for anybody's development. So I'm with you. I will say this, I felt like when Barry Trotz said that, everybody really looked at Luke Evangelista. I feel like he was sort of the one, they're like, there it is. There, this is his time. And Tommy Novak as well. It's funny, I lumped Tommy Novak in with the young guys just because we haven't seen him as much in the NHL, but he is an elderly 27, y'all.
An elder statesman. Yes.
Statesman. He is an old voice. But when it comes to Luke Evangelista, played 24 games last season, but he was what I felt like when Barry Trotz talked about this, in the words of Vivian Ward from Pretty Woman, he was a sure thing. Like he was going to get his chance, and he did. Played 80 games, 16 goals, 23 assists, 39 points. So when you look at Luke Evangelista's first full NHL season, Emma, what superlative do you award to Vange?
Well, I'm sticking with my I'm sticking with my trend here of kind of the funnier ones, or maybe more less about his hockey ability, because we're gonna talk about his hockey. Like, yeah, I think that the one I would give him would be most improved chirper. I think
So good.
maybe not even most improved. Maybe it's always been there, but this year he had the confidence for it. Like, I
Mhm.
think of two instances in particular.
I know one.
So the one was playing against New Jersey when I forget, like, I don't know if Eric Holla, because Eric Holla just beloved everywhere. I say with the utmost sarcasm.
Mhm.
I don't even know if he got called for a foul or for a penalty. A foul. I'm already thinking football. I don't know if he got called for a penalty or not, but he did something, and then the refs kind of had to separate him, and Luke Evangelista just kind of looks at him, and there's a screenshot that I wish I had here, but it's like you can just see him going ha right at Eric Holla, and it's like, you can't do that. It's like, it reminds me of like brothers on the
Yes.
playground or something. And then the other one, which I'm sure is the one that you were thinking of, is when they were playing Winnipeg, and Alex Iafallo kind of almost like had him in a headlock
Oh,
and kind
yeah.
of like horse collar tackled him a little bit. And the penalty's called, and Evangelista gets up, and they call the penalty, and he goes, "Go, bad boy," and points at the penalty box and is like, "Go." And it's like, that's such a adorable chirp, but like at the same time, it actually is like a good chirp.
It
Like
is so great.
it shows you that chirping doesn't have to be, you don't have to be like insulting each other's mothers and stuff like
Right.
that. It's like, bad boy, go. Because I mean, I would be pissed off if someone said that to me. I'd be
Oh,
like,
100%.
like, I think it's the beautiful game. I love it.
I don't know where Luke falls in birth order with his family, but he strikes me as the youngest
Oh
child.
yes.
And I'm so proud as a youngest myself. I'm like, well, well done, Luke Evangelista. You have honed some skills that will
Yes.
serve you in the NHL.
Yes.
My superlative is kind of along the same sort of funny lines, but there is meaning behind it. And I am awarding Luke Evangelista most likely to be Tony Stark if the Predators were the Avengers.
Okay.
Because he's very funny, super quick-witted, like we're talking about here, got a little bit of a bite to him, tons of charisma, but I also think we're going to see, and we've started to see kind of an arc for Luke Evangelista. Tony Stark went from calling himself, like, I think he called himself genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist. And I'm like, I can totally see
Oh
Luke
my gosh.
Evangelista saying I'm a genius, millionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
Yeah.
But eventually then Tony Stark goes and sacrifices himself for the team. And I'm like, I think there may be a storyline with the Predators where someday Luke Evangelista could be a really important centerpiece and somebody who can contribute to the team in a way that changes things for the franchise. And so for me, he's just a little bit like, and I can also see him going, I am Iron Man. Like that's just,
Yeah.
that's so Luke.
I am Iron Man, bad boy. He always is there with the reminder for me that I am a lot older than I think I am sometimes because he's the ultimate like Gen Z. Like I mean, first of all, he has all these words that I have never heard of. I'm going to sound so old, but like people jibs, zips. I'm like, what? Like it's like let me write these down. And then even like when I was on the road with them, I forget where we were. It was last season. It doesn't matter, but we were on the bus going to the game, and he was sitting across from me on the bus, and all the guys have headphones in. You know, they're all listening to whatever on the way to the game. And Cody Glass was behind me and said something to Luke. Was like, "What are you listening to?" And he said the name of, and I mean, I listen to rap, I listen to hip hop. I know that's like kind of what Luke likes too. So I'm like, I know names, even if I don't know a song. He said the name of some rapper, could not even tell you who it was. I was like, I've never heard of it. And it was like little something. And I was like, Lil Uzi? And he was like, no, little whatever. I don't even remember. That's what, and I was like, okay, I'll just go eat some Werther's Originals and put on my house slippers now because I have no idea what we're talking about. And it did make me feel better, though, that Cody Glass had never heard of this rapper either. I'm like, all right, that redeems me a little bit.
Well, coming up, we're actually going to get into the stats of Luke's season. We're going to talk about his on-ice performance, what we saw from him, the growth, and what could be next for Luke Evangelista coming up this season. But before we dive into all of that about Pretty Boy Vincenzo, let's talk about Game Time. There has been in the news lately talk about a particular ticketing service that's been busted for charging excessive fees. Well, let's not worry about that anymore. Let me tell you about the ticketing app that shows you your all-in pricing upfront and makes buying tickets fast and easy. My friends, check out Game Time. Game Time is the ticketing app that can get you great seats at great prices to all your favorite events: sports, comedy, theater, Major League Baseball, NBA playoffs, and plenty of local sports right here in Nashville. If you're out looking for a great evening activity, check out Game Time's great last-minute deals. They can save you up to 60% off when you buy last minute. And tickets are available right up to the first pitch with baseball. And with the Game Time app, you can get a view from your seat so you know exactly where you'll be and what you'll be seeing. Game Time also comes with the Game Time guarantee. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. So download the Game Time app today. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account at Game Time and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Emma, we are talking about Luke Evangelista, who is at least a week's worth of podcasts in and of himself on and off the ice. But we're going to try to get focused here. And let's talk about Luke's on ice season. And I think when you look at what Barry Trotz was talking about a reset, this is the kind of season that you want to see when you talk about a youth movement, because it was not easy, I think. And again, so much about the Predators season, I think, can be affected by recency bias, like that great, point streak and making the postseason. But again, Vanja's season was kind of up and down. In the Kimmel house, we always say nobody likes growth. And, you really saw Luke kind of go through, some growth up and down over the course of this season. And he landed in a good spot, but it was not always smooth sailing for Vange.
No, and it's is funny to think about that. Like you mentioned, he played 80 games, but those 2 games he didn't play. And that there was early in the season, and I remember, I don't even remember which game it was, but the first game where we learned at morning skate that he would be a healthy scratch. And
Yes.
I was like, oh Lord Jesus, take the wheel. I was not, I was like, the fans are not going to be happy about
Yep.
this. But I think it was such a good move on Andrew Brunette's part for all the reasons we just talked about, that it was like, hey, he was struggling and he wasn't the only one, but there are other, when the team's struggling and then you're a younger guy, this is really your first taste of like a full NHL season. Again, you don't want to just throw them in the deep end and be like, all right, figure it out, because
Right.
that is, you'll drown. That's not good. And so I think that he wanted to make sure that he didn't get too overwhelmed or whatever it was. And so like benched him kind of, as like a little reset. It's just like, hey, let's refocus here. And, it you've got this. We know that you're talented enough. We know that you have the skill, but sometimes it's just, it is an adjustment. Going from, again, 24 games to 80 games in 1 year is huge.
Huge.
And so I think the way that different players respond to that can vary greatly, and I think that he responded extremely well. I mean, obviously he did, and came back. And I think that, again, going back to the youth movement conversation, he is a guy that I feel like everyone kind of looks at as the standard of like, oh yes, we want this to happen with
Right.
all of the young guys. But in reality, I think Luke Evangelista is more of the exception than the rule in terms of how quickly he was able to make that adjustment. It's a very good exception to the rule.
Right.
Like, I think he was, it was a pleasant surprise, to be honest with you. I was expecting maybe a little more of a rough go of it. And he had a little bit of a rough go of it early, but I think when looking at other younger players, we have to maybe not use Luke Evangelista as the yardstick, because he
Yes.
was able to adjust so quickly and to take on that full-time NHL role, which is great. But I think that, one thing about him, I think you really saw his confidence growing. I mean, even with the chirps and stuff that we were just
Yes.
talking about, like you can
Yeah.
see him getting more and more confident, which is huge. Again, that Andrew Brunette decided to bench him earlier in the season to be like, hey man, let's not lose our confidence, like let's kind of reset here. And he did that. And I think I would really like to see, I just wrote about this last week for the Hockey News. I would really like to see the Predators sign a legitimate second line center.
Yes.
Um, Someone who can play, like who can be a playmaker for Luke Evangelista. Because if you look at his numbers this year, I mean, 39 points, 23 assists, 16 goals. I mean, he doubled his goal total from last year, but in almost quadruple the number of
Right.
games. And so you're like, you want to see a little bit more. I think if you get him on a line with a real playmaking center who can get the puck to him and allow him to do his thing, I think you're going to see his numbers skyrocket next year.
Yes, I agree with you. And talking about his growth over the course of the season, one of the things that I kind of looked at is you saw his growth not necessarily in numbers, but in completeness of his game. And one of the things that I worried about early, you know how I worry about these players. One of the things I worried about early is that it took Luke a little bit of time to kind of get on the score sheet. And one of the things that's interesting about Luke is that when he came into the OHL, he came in like super high expectations. Like he was kind of this, before he ever set foot on the ice, he was kind of this golden boy, and in his first season, played 27 games with the London Knights, didn't score any goals. And instantly there started to be this murmur about, is he, and then he came back and showed what he had. And had 111 points in the 2021-22 season with the London Knights. So really grew into the player that everybody expected. But it almost felt like to me that he was measuring his success by stats. And I think when you look at Luke at the end of the season, the thing that was so impressive to me about Vange was not his goal scoring or assist numbers or stats. It was the little things that he did, like how tenacious he was after the puck and how much more involved in puck battles he was and how much more aggressive he was. And so for me, it was good to see him sort of let go of the thing that's going to show up on the stat sheet, or maybe not focus totally on that and just round out his game. And I feel like he did such a great job of that. And I give a lot of credit to Andrew Brunette for that because, at the end of the season, Vange talked about he got some, like, he called them focus points from Andrew Brunette on, like, hey, at the All-Star break, focus on doing this. And I think that's when you really saw his game take off. And I don't know that he didn't share what his focus points were, but what you saw him grow in wasn't the stuff that's going to show up on the stat sheet and necessarily be this measurable thing. And I loved that for Luke. Like, I really loved seeing him grow his game and make it a more well-rounded game, because that's going to serve him well when they do exactly what you said, Emma, and get him a playmaker, because I think Luke could be something. I really, and everybody says this and that, but I'm telling you, I really think Luke can be something.
Yeah, his future is so bright, and I think, like you said, even the things that don't necessarily show up on the score sheet, like for example, in the playoffs, hardly anyone showed up on the score sheet during the playoffs.
Fact.
And that's more of a testament to Vancouver and how good their defense was. But I think watching Evangelista in the play, I mean, he did have the one goal against Vancouver. I want to, it was game 3, I think.
I can't even remember.
It feels
but
so
I believe
long
you.
ago.
It really does.
But even if he wasn't showing up on the score sheet, just watching him, I was like, this kid's going to be good. Like, this kid is really, I mean, he had a great playoffs, even if it didn't reflect on the score sheet. He was playing with confidence, and he was, and you could see even within the playoff series from like game 1 to game 5, you could see like his confidence improving. And that's exactly the kind of trajectory that you want to see. And, he's fast. He's so good with his hands, and he's got that scoring touch that, again, if you can get him with a real playmaker, and maybe, if he's not up against defensemen who are 8 feet tall, then maybe that's something that we do that, is going to be better for him. So I think that, yeah, I'm so excited to see where he goes from here, as long as he keeps growing in his confidence. And even if he's not, again, showing up on the score sheet, it'll come. It's Andrew Brunette's whole thing. That is like, keep doing the right things and you will get rewarded.
Right.
And I think that we're seeing that a lot in Luke's game this year.
Yep. One of the players maybe didn't get as much positive feedback from the fan base in the playoffs, Tommy Novak. Coming up, we're going to talk about Tommy Novak's season. We're going to talk about his postseason, what we want to see from him next year. And we're also going to talk about his contract. There are some people who don't like the contract, Emma. We'll talk about that coming up in just a minute. First, want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. There is no I in team, but there is one in Indeed, and that's the hiring platform you need to build yours. When you're hiring, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. They streamline the hiring process with powerful tools that find you matched candidates. With Instant Match, over 80% of employers get quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match their job description the moment they sponsor a job, according to US Indeed data. So join more than 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at indeed.com/lockedon. Offer good for a limited time. Claim your $75 job credit now at indeed.com/lockedon. Again, that's indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, Emma. So, talking about young players, Luke was definitely high on everybody's list of players to watch. The other one that I think people had very high expectations for, Tommy Novak. Tommy Novak came in and he's had a little bit more experience. He's played almost 150 NHL games. He played 71 this season, 18 goals, 43 points. And again, he's 27 years old, but I tend to lump him into that kind of quote youth movement that Barry Trotz talked about. When you look back at Tommy's season, what superlative do you award Tommy Novak? And I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's not best chirper.
It is not. It is not. I would love to hear Tommy Novak chirp. Like
It'll never happen.
No, but I feel like it would be one of those things that it would be so unexpected that you'd be like, "Whoa, what? What did
all of the Predators players would just stop playing and be like,
what?" No, okay, so there's this trend, and this shows how old I am because I see things on Instagram and Twitter, and by that point they're usually like several weeks old because they started on TikTok and I'm not on TikTok.
Yeah, me neither.
I think this is something that started on TikTok. I did have to look it up, but I saw it on Twitter and Instagram where it was a whole trend recently that was like, if I won the lottery, I wouldn't tell anyone, but there would be signs and people would show like, a whole, like a room full of Beanie Babies or like something ridiculous that it's like, there would be signs, but I just wouldn't tell anyone. I think Tommy Novak is most likely to win the lottery and no one would know. Like there would be no signs. Absolutely no signs.
Yeah.
He signed the contract. You mentioned the 3-year, $10.5 million, which I actually like that contract, frankly. But I think it was Evangelista actually who said afterwards, because we asked him about it, and he goes, "Yeah, I mean, he can buy a lot of Chipotle and ice cream with that 10.5 million." And it's like, that's what he'll do. Like
100%.
he is the most just like, he just wants to play hockey and live his life. Like he doesn't think we can all tell that he does not spend money on clothes.
Bless.
I love the kid, but oh, buddy. He could use a wardrobe upgrade, primarily like maybe a suit that fits and that isn't 2 sizes too big. Might be good.
Yep.
He's not into appearances. He's not like, he doesn't take big fancy vacations. He's just not, he doesn't have expensive tastes. And so I feel like he would be the guy that would win the lottery. No one would have any idea because it's not like he would just start buying all these fancy things. And then it would be something where like one day when he dies and people realize how much money he had and they'd be like, what? Like, yeah. So I think that would be him.
True.
He's just a simple guy. He doesn't need a lot.
Regular. Tommy Novak is just, and so nice. I totally agree with you. The ice cream thing with Tommy Novak is one of my favorite things because I did an article on game day kind of like not superstitions, but like game day routines, like things that you feel like you have to do. And of course they talk about naps and game day meals, but Tommy Novak, and he was so serious about it. He's like, when we're on the road, I have to have a bowl of ice cream. And then they were somewhere, I don't know where y'all were, and he's like, and they didn't have ice cream. And I didn't have a bowl of ice cream. And I was like, I bet you were fine. But I didn't want to say it out loud because he seemed very distraught that the on the road meal, they did not have ice cream. He really likes him some ice cream.
He does. He makes it. Makes his own ice cream. Yeah. He has an ice cream maker and he makes his own flavors and stuff. And he used to, when he was younger, he said he used to make it for his friends. I'm like, oh, that's nice. And he was like, yeah, I would sell it to them. I was like,
on.
So maybe, he is just stockpiling all that money, all that ice cream money for God knows what. He's not spending it on suits, I can tell you that. But
oh my gosh, I love him and his ice cream.
It's the best.
My superlative for Tommy has to do a little bit with his personality as well. And for me, I'm going to award him most likely to say, "Oh, excuse me," while playing hockey, because he just he does not chirp. Like, he has said to me, yeah, that's never going to be a part of it. Nope, don't do it. But just he's just a good guy, and I think he's probably a good guy on the ice. Doesn't mean that I don't think that he is not competitive or anything like that, but he just strikes me as somebody who, if he knocked you over, he would say, oh, excuse me. bless
He's
bless
he just again, like I have a friend who played with Tommy. I can't remember if it was in junior or something, like when they were younger,
Mhm.
in Minnesota. And he like I remember asking him, like, what do you remember about Tommy? Just playing with him. And he was like, honestly, that guy, because I feel like Tommy is kind of a hard guy. He's kind of a hard guy to get a read on,
Mhm.
like if you don't know him, because he's kind of quiet, and I remember asking him, like, what do you remember about Tommy? And he was like right on the money with this, that it was like, Tommy just really doesn't care about anything except playing hockey.
He played very well for the Predators this season, finished the season 5th in goals, 5th in assists, 5th in points on the team, 4th in power play goals. Not bad when you're looking at, hey, we're looking at somebody who could be a good middle six player. Spent a lot of time this season with Evangelista, Mark Jankowski as well. When people look at Tommy Novak right now, and again, it comes back to this recency bias. I feel like a lot of people may be disappointed because he didn't show up necessarily in the postseason. But what is your big takeaway from his full season, Emma, regular season and postseason, when you look at his performance?
I think that he had maybe a little bit of a more traditional trajectory. Like I said, Luke Evangelista didn't. Like, Luke Evangelista was the exception. I
Yes.
think Tommy Novak had a little bit of that sophomore slump that is to be expected. And I don't think that that's an indication of any larger problem. I mean, if you look at like his season numbers, like he had 45 points in 71 games after last year having 43 points in 51 games. Like, you would like to see those numbers improve.
Right.
I think there were a lot of things at play there. Like, again, I think that he needs to work on getting stronger, and he's fast. He's already fast, but I think that like the brunette system really kind of hit him like a ton of bricks, and it took him
Yes.
a little while to kind of get used to that. He's a smaller guy, but I just the thing that I kept noticing in the playoffs especially is he couldn't stay on his feet. Like,
Mhm.
if you're getting knocked around by 6'9", Nikita
Nikita
Zadorov, like,
Zadorov, yeah.
he people are saying, "Oh, Tommy Novak's not doing anything." It's like, well, no, because he can't stay on his feet. Like, I think that's the problem, is like, and it's not entirely his fault. I mean, I don't want to say that nothing is on him, but it's like, maybe if you had, again, you have him on a line with Luke Evangelista, who's also not the biggest guy,
Huge. Right.
and you can't count on Mark Jankowski to single-handedly fend off all of these
Right.
Vancouver defensemen to let Novak and Evangelista go do their thing.
Right.
It's just not, you can't do that. And so he's another one that I think, like, I would like to see him maybe work on his conditioning and work on some strength training this summer.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he will. I just think that we saw last season how much he just really stepped up his game, and became, like, finished the Preds leading scorer in the second half of the year last year. And I think we're seeing what he can do. And he makes some great plays. I would just like to, whether it's putting him with different line mates and or getting a little stronger. I think that again, I'm not worried about the contract. I think it was a good contract. I think
Yeah.
you keep him under $4 million a year, because there were rumors around the trade deadline that there were going to be teams willing to offer him $5 million a year,
Yes.
which I said no. I'm like, I love Tommy, and I think he's a great player. I don't think he's proven yet that he is worth that, just because
Yes.
this was only his second NHL season,
Right.
really. Well, third technically, but I mean, second full NHL season. And I think that, you need more of a sample size before you offer a guy that kind of money. And so I think that Barry Trotz was right on the money, no pun intended, that he got him for under $4 million a year. You get the whole deal done for under $11 million. I like it. I think that's a good middle six center contract. Now, I think I would like to see him play more on the wing next year. We saw a little bit of it this year. I know the Preds need depth at center and they don't need wingers, but I just think that, again, if he's a smaller guy who is maybe not going to be able to make those plays when he's up against, competition like that, I think you put him on the wing, you put him with like I said, same with Evangelista, put him with a playmaking center. Oh, look out.
He could do some things. Yeah. Absolutely. And I agree with you on the contract. I know there are some people that do not like this contract, that feel like, he is not worth $3.5 million each year. But here's what I will say about Novak: 27 years old, but we have not seen his ceiling yet. We have not seen Novak's ceiling yet. And not in the sense that, like, we know that Philip Forsberg's going to get a little bit better and a little bit better. I just don't think Tommy Novak's hit his baseline for what he can do in the NHL yet, even at 27 years old. So for me, I think Novak is a good investment. Well, that is what we think about Tommy Novak and Luke Evangelista. We would love to hear what you think. Drop us a comment on our YouTube page. Let us know what you think of their season. Maybe give us your superlative for them. What do you think about that Novak contract? You can also drop us a note on Twitter. You can find the podcast there at LO_Predators. Emma, where can everybody find you on social media, and where can they find your work?
They can find me, same handle, on Twitter and Instagram, Emma_Lingen, and you can find my work at the Hockey News.
You can find me on social media at AnnK_Mama on Ice. You can find my work at penaltyboxradio.com. That's going to do it for today's episode of the Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen of the day. We will be back tomorrow to talk about some more season superlatives.